Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
If you love having a laugh and live in Melbourne, then head down to the Rubber Chicken in South Melbourne. It's a dedicated comedy venue. Drink, eat and have fun in the Elliot Goblet Bar on the ground floor. Or head upstairs to Punchlines Comedy Club, featuring Australia's funniest professional comedians. This is Melbourne's comedy hub and it's also the home of the School of Hard Knock Knocks. So get on down to the Rubber Chicken in South Melbourne.
You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Steve Davis.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I have ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
Comedian Tom Siegert got his comedy spark at the Gershwin Room in St Kilda. His muse was the legendary Greg Fleet. Today, Tom's an established comedian in his own right, having performed on TV and at comedy festivals around Australia. In this School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast, host Steve Davis digs deep into Tom's evolution from one-liner comedian to storyteller, as well as his creation of the comedy character, the Suburban Footballer. And on the topic of Aussie Rules, you'll also hear how Tom stood up to protect his comedy against the formidable Eddie McGuire, former host and president of the Footy show and Collingwood Football Club, respectively. And if you enjoy this podcast, you might also like to see comedian Tom Siegert at the 2022 Melbourne International Comedy Festival at the Rubber Chicken in South Melbourne, April 21 to 24. In the meantime, be sure to join our Facebook group, the School of Hard Knock Knocks community, to stay abreast of upcoming courses, stand-up comedy shows and general advice for comedy performers. And now, here he is, Tom Siegert.
I was recently having a conversation with my lady. We're talking about our relationship. And I said to her, hey, baby cakes, what's it like for you when we make love? Is it good? She looked deep into my eyes and she said, Tom, when we make love, it's like time stands still. And I said, oh, yeah? Please elaborate. And she said, well, for example, last Thursday night we started making love at 7:32. And when you'd finished, I looked at the clock and it was still 7:32.
Tom Siegert, welcome to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Look, I feel we are kindred spirits. We've only just met, and it's because we're both bonded by this thing called comedy. But my very first job out of school was stock control manager at the paint department at Godfrey's Hardware, and your day job is in the realm of hardware. I feel there's a bonding moment happening.
Yeah, no, certainly is. Luckily, I've ummed and ahed over the last probably 10 years whether or not to stick with the day job, but something made me stay with it. Don't know whether it was a lack of confidence or what it was, but I stuck with it, and thank goodness I did, because the last 18 months in comedy has been pretty quiet, obviously, because of COVID. So, so I've pretty much been full-time in the hardware industry, and I enjoy it. I do enjoy it.
It must also be good for getting ideas for some comedy as well, because we've spoken to you're your 101st comedian we've spoken to, and there's a common theme of just having a few irons in the fire just to balance out, risk in the general realm of the career. But surely the exposure to all sorts of people, that's got to be a good thing. Yeah,
it has. And look, they say comedians are obviously the funniest people in the world, but God, some of my mates at work are just as funny as my comedy mates. So you're sort of bouncing ideas off each other and just having a good laugh at day-to-day stuff. And it can't hurt. The more experiences, the better, I guess.
Yes. Now, let's get into a little bit of your history, because you grew up in Wollongong, if I'm right, and moved into Melbourne. And you saw...
Incorrect.
Oh,
sorry.
Tell me, my reason.
Very close. No, you might have been... predictive text might have stuffed you up there, because it was Wodonga. So Wodonga sometimes becomes Wollongong when you're halfway through it. So that might be it. But at Wodonga, on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, is where I grew up.
Well, that's a slight disadvantage on the Australian Scrabble board. I think you lose a few points with Wodonga. But at least we'll get the story.
Still impressive. It's still a good one. Yeah.
It is. It's still hard for anyone to spell outside of Australia. So from Wodonga to Melbourne, you saw Greg Fleet at the SB in St Kilda, I believe. Unless that's a typo as well, and you actually saw someone completely different, Denise Drysdale, but let's go with Greg Fleet.
No, it was Fleety. I was, so I grew up in Wodonga and then did a bit of travel through Canada and spent a lot of time, a year or so in Canada and the United States and Mexico, and after then returning to Wodonga, found it was a bit small, so moved down to Melbourne, originally to have a kick of footy with some mates down in Melbourne, and then met a girl at the pub and we went on a date to the SB, and we were just sitting out the front of the SB, and I didn't even know what stand-up comedy was. Never growing up in Wodonga, there was obviously no scene, there was no internet back then, so I just wasn't, I wasn't watching comedy on YouTube or whatever, and a girl was going around, we were having a beer out the front of the SB, and a girl was going around handing out flyers, trying to get people to go out to the Gershwin room to watch some comedy, and we said, yeah, why not? I don't know whether we were struggling for conversation or what, but we were both pretty keen to get back there, and we paid our $10 entry fee, sat down, and still to this day have never laughed that hard in my life. And I remember it was Greg Fleet was the headline act, and I probably did half an hour, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was mind blowing. And I remember the girl just looked at me and she said, "Wow, you'd love to do that, wouldn't you?" And I said, "Oh yeah," but I just thought it was like being an astronaut and going to the moon. It was unachievable, but so from that day, it was sort of, that definitely planted the seed that was something I wanted to do. And it wasn't until years later I did it, but from that day, it was on the to-do list.
So can you remember, was there a moment in the show or something or an audience reaction? What was it that sunk home?
I guess it was, yeah. So it was just the insanity of the whole thing. And I've since seen Fleety 100 times and realised that what he was doing wasn't spur of the moment, and it's part of the act. But, seeing it for the first time, like he was doing this thing about, he'd just stop and say, when you're running away because you've just killed a prostitute, and it was just insane, and it was just like, what is he talking about? And the whole place was just going crazy. And then, but then I went and saw him again, and he did exactly the same thing. And so it obviously wasn't insanity. It was part of the act. But I remember that very clearly, and it was amazing. And he was on that day. It was it was brilliant. But that was one of the main bits I remember. Yeah, very funny. Funny.
That's what I noticed with some of the established comedians. You see them do their shtick a number of times when you move in these circles. And for you, on that trajectory, the wanderlust is all there. Seeing him repeat what was supposedly spontaneous before, and now, what was the reaction there? Was it, I've been duped, or was it, wow, there is a master craftsman at work?
No, it was probably relief as someone that wanted to do it, that you didn't have to come up with something that brilliant 3 times a week, that you could just come up with something brilliant and keep reusing it. Because I think most comedians, when they start out, think that you're going to have to come up with a new 20 minutes every time you take the stage. And then it's quite a relief when you realise, hang on, you just work on your material, and you can got some comedians doing the same 30 minutes for the last 20 years. So it was probably more relief than anything that, that's good. But and if you love something enough, like, you don't crack it because you go and see Pearl Jam and they play alive every time you go see them. If you really enjoy something, you're happy to see it over and over again.
Yeah, I think on that, the singers tend to get off scot-free compared to the comedians. Probably the expectations a little higher. With the musicians, lower expectations of new stuff is just the beginning. But, back in the early days, though, when you did stand-up comedy, is this true? Did you keep it from your mates and kind of come up with a story that you were seeing a girl instead of going out and doing open mics?
True. You often hear comedians say, my first gigs, I brought all my mates along, and that was great because they laughed. and obviously these people have very different set of mates than I do, because my mates, if they came along to the first gigs, would have, I don't know, tried to get to the sound desk and pull one of the plugs out or something. But we still love each other and support each other. But not like that. They wouldn't come along and laugh if they didn't think it was funny. They would tell you exactly how it was. Yes. So and I was a bit I was terrified, absolutely terrified when I started out, but I really wanted to do it. So you're correct. I made up a story that I was seeing a girl. I was living in a share house with two mates, and it just gave me an excuse to have a shower, put on some decent threads, and head out and not come home till 11:30 midnight, and be no questions asked because I'd just been out in the day, or some questions asked, but not about the gig. And so I did that for probably 2 or 3 months before I eventually fessed up that I was actually single and was having a little fling with a open mic comedy career on the side.
Well, it's a match made in heaven from what I've seen so far of your career.
Yeah. They must have thought the relationship was really struggling, because I'd come home fairly dishevelled and down in the dumps most nights after I'd go out. So I don't know what they thought.
It's a hard life at the outset. Although you've evolved over time, and I don't mean that in a negative, positive way, just a change, because the one-liners, your early stuff, I've seen your sizzle reel back from a long time ago. Where it is just that set-up and kabang. And now moving more towards stories, what's that transition been like?
I'm still very much set up punchline, but they're just slightly longer. I'm writing a new festival show, and I think I was just trying to work out how many jokes I'm going to need to film a 50 minutes the other night, and I was working it all out, and most of my jokes are between 40 and 60 seconds, so they're still fairly short. So that's a build-up punchline, then move on to a completely different topic. So that's still fairly short, but in the early days they were 10, 15 seconds. But that's a tough way to fill time doing a lot of those. I think quite a few comedians start out doing that, but it's just very, very hard jacker. I was very much like Elliot Goblet, Stephen Wright back in the early days. I remember not many people do the one-liners. Elliot Goblet, or Jack Levi is his real name, saw me do a gig once, and I had a good night, just did 5 minutes, did a heap of one-liners, and he loved it and came up to me after the show and said, there's not many people doing that anymore. And I cracked a unintentional joke that he absolutely loved, because it was a coincidence. He came up and said, "G'day, mate, Jack Levi, loved your stuff." And I said, "Mate, this is a coincidence. I just bought your CD. I was driving home from Wodonga the other night and stopped into the service station and bought your CD and listened to it on the way home and absolutely loved it." And he said, "Oh, yeah, what one?" And I said, the one just near Glenrowan, the petrol station at Glenrowan. And because I was a bit starstruck and I wasn't thinking straight. And he cracked up laughing. He goes, "Mate, you have a very good sense of humour." And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I just say?" And I seriously thought that's what he meant. But obviously he meant what record, what CD, because he's got 3 or 4 of them. So, interesting.
Well, I got to meet Jack when we were filming Is This Thing On with the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
And he said to me that before he would go on the Hey Hey Saturday, whatever the show was, they would read through his jokes had to be given up and checked through, and the producer would say, "There's not a single joke in this, but I know it's how you deliver them. That's all it is."
Yeah.
With your stuff on the Footy show, etc., were you in a situation where you had to present your material in advance, or was it actually spontaneous?
Definitely wasn't spontaneous, but I never had to present my stuff. No, on the Footy show. Maybe it's maybe things had chilled out a bit, and it was a later time slot. So
True.
Yeah, I never had to. I never had to present my stuff. But that's because that's obviously doing the Suburban Footballer character, which I started up about 5 years ago, which opened up a lot of doors. And my passion is definitely still the straight stand-up, but it's the Suburban Footballer that gets me most of my work. So, yeah. But, no, I enjoyed them both.
Psychologically, I mean, I know you owe a lot of tribute to the Suburban Footballer, which is a great character, by the way. Hats off. You can just see a microcosm of just about every suburb in Australia when you see you in full flight. As much as it's opened the door money-wise and exposure, does it annoy you a bit that it's the Ascendant is the one that easily gets the booking versus the Straight? Or is it, no, these are just riches, pile them on my plate?
No, I get it. I mean, there's a dime a dozen, like many comedians like me just doing straight stand-up, whereas that's a real point of difference. So, and it's a fairly niche market, but it's a very big niche market for, local footy clubs in Australia. There's just thousands of them. So I've switched it up a bit. People used to book me for a Saturday night, and I used to go to their club and do 2 45-minute halves as the Suburban Footballer, and it was the whole storyline. It had a start, had a plot, it had a big finale, it had a twist, had characters. But now I could really see that my stand-up, although it was my passion, I just wasn't getting as many gigs. So I changed it up. So now I do 45 minutes of stand-up comedy straight as myself, have a break, and then I come back and do the Suburban Footballer in the second half, a tighter. I've taken the storyline out of it, but I've just basically jammed all the jokes into 40, 45 minutes. So I get the best of both worlds every Saturday night. So I'm getting to do 45, 50 minutes of straight stand-up at least once a week, which is good. And but also, if I just do the Suburban Footballer and they enjoy it, I can usually sell myself for next year to come back and do straight stand-up. So it works out fine. I'm quite happy with it.
Yeah, okay. And just on that difference between the rapid-fire punchline kind of jokes and the story jokes, when you're doing such extended sets, are the punchline after punchline ones harder to remember? I mean, what are your techniques for remembering that? Because I do a more story-based stuff, and you've got this narrative flow to follow, and from the way my brain's wired, that just works beautiful. There's guide rails you can go along, whereas my hat is off to those of you like you and Jack Levi who can just go rapid fire, bang, 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 and not miss a beat.
Yeah, well, I guess it does have to be, when they're short, it has to be, if not word for word, very close to it, and your last 10 words have got to be probably spot on, word for word, because there is a best way to say it, and if you don't quite nail those words, it doesn't quite have the same impact. But I'm funny. Once I start a joke, I'm away. But once, it's almost like I've pressed play and it's just autopilot. But the tough bit is, and actually after having so long off this year, the hardest bit I've found is remembering just the joke, where I used to finish a joke and thought, oh, that one went well. They're up and about. I've got a bit of time now. I could probably try a new joke. Mm-hmm. And I just used to be able to, look up into the imaginary library above my head of all my jokes and just within seconds grab one down and say, do this. But that's the thing that's probably gone. It's all a bit blurry up there at the moment. It'll come back, I've got no doubt, in the 5 or 6 gigs I've done already, it's coming back, but that's more remembering that. There's probably a couple of hundred jokes up there and just thinking, oh, that one didn't go well. Better hit them now with something that I know is going to work and get them back on track. Whereas I look up there now and she's a bit cloudy up there at the moment. But as far as remembering the jokes, once I start them, we're away.
Okay. And just before we move on from the character, one last thing. If there is someone out there who is tossing up, do I chance my arm and come up with a character, what would be your advice to them?
I wouldn't do it personally. I got lucky with this one. I reckon long term, the more you can be yourself, the better. And that's where, even in the early days, Tom Siegert probably used to be a character. In my early days, I used to come out in this full head-to-toe brown, skin-tight Adidas tracksuit when I was doing my my one-liners, and I was a real character. I used to stand there very much like Elliot Goblet and wouldn't move, feet concreted on the ground. And then someone actually smashed the window of my car and stole my tracksuit. It was the best thing that happened to me because I had to do a gig that night without it, and I was just like, the shackles were off and I could be myself, and now I really am myself. When I get on stage, I'm Tom Siegert. I'm not a character. And, I reckon the more you can be yourself, because then, now everyone's doing podcasts and everything. And then, when you do a podcast, do you do it as yourself, or are you the character, or what do you do? It's pretty hard to host things or do podcasts when you're a character. So, yeah, the more you can be yourself, the better, I reckon.
Okay, unless I suppose it's just burning in you and you just got to get it out, but that's good.
Yeah. Unless there's a character you really want to do, go ahead. But it is a bit tiresome doing being a character all the time.
That's good sage advice. The Footy show must have been a great highlight thus far. What are some other highlights of your comedy journey to this day?
The Footy show was definitely highlight and low light. It was pretty stressful, and I ended up quitting in the end. It all got a bit much.
Really?
Mate. Long story, but yeah, basically, and I've talked about this on other podcasts, but I said right from the start, because they got me in, I said the first episode I'm going to do stuff from my show. I'm quite happy to use stuff from my show, but I don't want to use stuff from my show every week, or I'm just gonna ruin the show, because basically the Footy show wasn't paying great. It was more about exposure. So whereas my income was coming from the Saturday nights, and I said I'm not going to ruin my Saturday night show for the sake of 2.5 minutes every Thursday night on the Footy show, which even at bad ratings with online was getting seen by 500,000 people. Their little highlight clips that they put on social media and so forth. So I said, first episode came out, had an absolute, it couldn't have gone better, but I sort of knew it would, because it was basically the best of my 1.5 hour show jammed into 2.5 minutes. So it was always going to go well. And then the second night we came out, second week it was okay. It was stuff I'd written that week. It was topical. It worked. And then the next week, because what I used to do was warm the crowd up pre-show, off air. I used to get out there in my Footy gear and get everyone to stand up and go, all right, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. And gee the crowd up. And Eddie McGuire would walk past, and he'd love it. He goes, oh, mate, you really fire him up. And I used to tell a few jokes about nicknames. I've got a whole list of nicknames that I do in my show, and they go great. I always get a laugh. And he said, next week we're going to get you right up the top of the show when everyone's watching, ratings are at their highest. You're going to do your best nicknames. And I said, and I was in his office, and I said, oh no, mate, I'm not doing that. It's it'll ruin my show. And he goes, yeah, no, you'll do it next week. And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, yes, you are. And I said, no, I'm not, Eddie. And I'm a mad Collingwood supporter, so I'm here. Half of me's thinking, oh my God, I'm having an argument with Eddie McGuire. Yes. This is awful. And the other side of me thinking, I cannot wait to tell my mates I'm here having a fight with Eddie McGuire. This is the best thing. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And he's so we're going backwards and forwards, and then he's sort of going stuff, and he's cracked it. And anyway, I got in the car the next day to drive to work. It was back when he was doing radio with Will Anderson, and he's still going. 6:30 in the morning, he's still going. He's going, well, what's wrong with you bloody comedians? You don't want to do your best stuff on TV. He goes, if I go and see AC/DC, I want to see Thunderstruck. If they don't do Thunderstruck, why don't comedians want to do their best stuff on TV? But Will Anderson was really good. He goes, mate, it's different. You do, you see Thunderstruck 100 times, you're still going to sing along to it. You see a joke, hear a joke 4 times, it's done and dusted. Even you hear it once, it's done and dusted.
Yes.
So anyway, I wrote him a big long letter saying, look, guys, obviously we want different things. Let's call it quits. And they said, they were really good. They came back and said, look, if you want to come on and if you have any ideas, shoot them through to us. And they were good enough I got on there and I grilled Dane Swan once, and I did a little mock press conference, which went really well, and maybe one other thing. But yeah, that was about it. But funnily enough, Eddie's obviously, he's amazing. I'm a massive fan of Eddie McGuire. I think he's done amazing things. I thought he was very hard done by the way he left the Pies. But he, anyway, at the end of the year, West Coast from the grand final. And a mate rang up and said, can we go to a mate from WA was coming over to Melbourne and said, any chance you can get us tickets to the Footy show, grand final? It's all sold out. And I said, I'm not really there anymore, but I'll give it a go. So I texted my mate that worked there and said, any chance you can get us a couple of tickets to the Footy Show Grand Final. And he said, mate, your name's still on the list that you work here, and everyone that works here gets 4 free tickets. so you can get your tickets. And I said, oh, fantastic. And he goes, yeah, I'll go grab them for you. And he rang back about 3 minutes later and goes, oh, Eddie McGuire put a black line through your name, so you're not getting your tickets.
Oh, wow.
So talk about holding a grudge. And look, I don't know whether it was Eddie that put the line through or who cut me off, but look, I couldn't care less. The Footy Show guys were great to me. I could not have asked any more of them, but yeah, it was a crazy experience. But yeah.
Tell me though, Tom, because there aren't many people who would stand up like that at the risk of being cut off. Would you do it again? Was it the right thing?
Right thing to say?
To stand up and say, look, I'm going to protect my gear for my live shows.
Yeah, and the reason I was so confident to do it is because after I did the first show that went unbelievable, and without sounding like a flog, like it could not have gone any better. Like I remember just thinking, this is a dream come true. And anyway, and I went and did a show. So that would have been Thursday night. I did a show on the Saturday night, and the Footy Show I'd released had cut it down into a little 2.5 minute video that had circulated on social media, so everyone had seen it, especially footy people. And I went and did a footy club down past Geelong, and all those jokes that I did on the show got nothing, and they were my best jokes. And that's when I knew I walked out of there that night going, I'm not going to ruin another joke. Like, I've worked too hard to write those for them to be ruined for 2.5 minutes of TV.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's look at the sun starting to rise after the darkness of COVID. It's not there yet. It's peeping through the clouds. You've done a couple of spots at the Rubber Chicken in South
Correct.
Melbourne, and A, what's it feel like coming back from lockdown and doing that? And B, I believe you're doing your Melbourne International Comedy Festival show there. So give us the laydown, what that's been like, and how are you travelling? How are you re-gearing?
Yeah, great. Couldn't be better. I was one of the people that a lot of people were thinking that COVID was going to blow over in a couple of weeks. For some reason, I thought we were in it for the long haul. I always did. So I planned and kept busy and did a lot of writing and stayed pretty active, and now I'm just so ready to get back out, and hopefully it stays this way. But at the moment, I'm just pumped to be getting. I've got a new appreciation for getting up on stage, and even I've done a few gigs. I've probably done 6 or 7 gigs since at different venues. I've done gigs in front of 10 people since coming back. One of them was 10 people at a gig in the city, and I remember just thinking 2 years ago I would have hated that, and now I was just appreciative to be standing on stage in front of 10 people. So, hopefully it lasts forever, my new appreciation for it. Probably wasn't. I've been doing stand-up for nearly 20 years, and after 20 years of anything, it's probably not bad to have a bit of time off and decide, with what path you want to go down with it. So, yeah, the timing was pretty good. So, I'm just pumped. And, yeah, you're right. Sorry, you go.
And I just one quick thing. I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but that small audience of 10 people, go back, yes, it might have annoyed you towards the height pre-COVID, but you would have had that taste along the way. Do you think that particular experience, both you and the audience were just bloody grateful to be out and having that experience, and it was different to doing a small crowd back in the normal times?
Yeah, I think
or not.
So, no, definitely. But I was MC on both nights, and I think what I think I try to do is don't just make it a normal night when it's 10 people instead of it is a different night between 10 people and 250 people, and you address that. You don't just pretend it's a full house and bellow out as if there's 1,000 people there. You treat it as a more intimate night, so you take the positives that it's going to be it's a different sort of a night, and it's a more intimate, and you get to know the crowd, and so that's to answer your question. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't have done that before before COVID, but yeah, because I was looking for the positives instead of being like, oh, there's not many people here. I was like, well, there's not many people here. That's great. We can, get to know everyone and have some fun. And every night every night I've done so far, I think the crowds have really enjoyed it, and just happy to be out with their friends.
And do you think there's a dual role on that with a small crowd these days? The MC should be acknowledging, but the acts should continue on with that old advice of just belt it out as if it's a full stadium? Or do you think acknowledging...
It's not... Yeah, that's not bad. I think... I think if every single person gets up there and says, what do you do? What do you do? The crowd can be like, is this our show or your show?
Is this a job interview?
I think they've still got to hear some jokes, yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's a fine line.
And I did interrupt you. I think you were coming around to look forward to the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. From the sounds of it, you've got plenty of material to start honing down for.
Yeah, I guess the only question now is if it's funny. That's a very minor detail we've got to sort through, but there's plenty of material there. And, so I'm doing the Rubber Chicken for 4 nights, just 4 nights, because it's quite a busy time with the footy club. So I sort of didn't want to eat into too many Saturday nights where I'll be doing footy clubs, because it is a limited season, the footy season. Yep. So it's just such a great room. The moment I saw it, I just fell in love with it. The acoustics were as good as you could get, and it was great. So so I'm definitely looking forward to getting there for 4 nights during the festival, and hopefully pull a bit of a crowd for them.
Now, look, would you promise me in testing your material to see if it's funny or not? You must have Eddie McGuire's number. Could you just record ringing him up out of the blue and just firing a couple of jokes and capturing his reaction? Because I think that would just be gold. That would help bond you and mend the bridges.
No, I think Eddie changes his number fairly regularly, and believe it or not, he didn't give me his number, so that won't be part of the show, unfortunately. But good idea, though.
Yeah,
very good idea.
Last 2 things. Advice to any new comics listening, would-be comedians. What sort of things would you say is going to be useful to gear themselves up to make a good shot, a good crack at this comedy thing?
Have us get up on stage as often as possible. I'm sure everyone says that, whether it be at your Nana's 80th, whether it be at your sister's wedding, whether you be in front of 3 people. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, try and don't worry about the 15 comedians that are there, worry about the 4 paid punters. They're the ones you got to make laugh. They call it don't play at the back of the room.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely do that. You're better off having 5 minutes of gold than an hour and a half of absolute crap. So instead of trying to get on stage and do a new 5 minutes every time, just work on it and work on it and work on it until you get a good 5, and then you aim for 10, and then work on it, and then they aim for 15, and then 20, and then you just want to have a good 20. And if a joke it's not working, get rid of it. And you're better off. I reckon quality over quantity. And just enjoy it. Be yourself, and just enjoy it. Don't get caught up in the. It can be a bit bitter and disheartening because there's no rhyme or reason who gets the big breaks or the big gigs or the TV spots. Don't worry what is happening to anyone else. Just enjoy your own little ride would be my advice.
There's some good advice there. With your permission, I'd love to print a little bit of that and hang it on our bedroom wall, the bit that said, don't settle for an hour and a half of shit when you can have 5 minutes of gold. Tom Siegert.
Even 5 minutes of gold's fairly generous, I think, sometimes.
I wasn't going to get that personal. Hey, Tom, finally, where can we see you perform over the next few months? We're hitting mid-November 2021, the time of recording. So in the lead up to Christmas, New Year, what have you got on?
I reckon it is all cricket clubs at the moment. I think the Saturday nights are booked out till end of March, which is great. And there's just different. And I guess I'll just jump up the open mics around Melbourne. I'll definitely get up at the Rubber Chicken again. And but yeah, nothing major. The major ones are the cricket club. So it's just every Saturday night, every Sunday, I'll be doing a cricket club of some description. I want to start putting them on my Suburban Footballer page. So yeah, if they want to follow me, get on the Suburban Footballer Facebook page and see what it's all about.
And final question, if I'm painting my bathroom, do I need to do an undercoat, and do I use matte or gloss?
That's plumbing. We're in the hardware game. I wouldn't have a clue. That sounds more like paint. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
we sell safes, letterboxes, kids' play equipment, and rubber products. So if you want to know anything about the density of rubber, give us a hoy.
Well, I'll add that to what's hanging on my bedroom wall. A little bit of rubber from Tom. All right, Tom Siegert, thanks for joining the School of Hard Not Knocks podcast.
No dramas. Thanks for having me.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.